Let's see if this works. It works, James. Here's your microphone.
Thank you.
I'd like to bid you welcome here to Copenhagen. It's a great privilege and an honor to have you here. I met you yesterday and we have become acquainted. I can say that it's also a pleasure now.
Well, it's taken me a long time to get to Denmark. I can tell you that. This is the first trip ever in my long life. I've been so many other places and not very far away either, but I've never come to Denmark or Copenhagen, and I'm awfully glad to have come, and thank you. I sort of invited myself.
And we said yes, please. So, James, I need to ask you, I will start the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
What sparked the idea to make this movie? Can you please tell us how you got in touch with the story and what made you say, I need to make this film?
Well, at a party in upstate New York, where I live, someone came up to me, a friend, and put the paperback copy of the novel into my pocket and said, I think you should read this. This might be something you really like, and who knows. And I did read it right away, and I liked it very much. And I thought, yes, I would love to make this into a film. But one of the reasons, it wasn't just the story, it was the fact that it was set in South America, and I'd never been to South America. And well, it was a way of inviting myself to South America, I guess. So I showed it to Ruth, who liked the novel very much, and it meant quite a bit to her as well, and to Ismail, and he liked it, and so we decided we would do it, and if we possibly could. We were working on another film at that time, on the White Countess. But we finished that, and or I finished it because Ismail died in between. And then I did go to Argentina. The film is set in Uruguay, supposedly. I mean, in the novel it's set in Uruguay, but we shot it in Argentina, which is right next door. And because Argentina has a whole production setup, which Uruguay doesn't have. And so we shot it in Argentina, about 90 miles north of Buenos Aires, and I just very much like the story. I like the whole setup of that group of people, of all of them sort of from different places, and in that house, in that place, and sort of refugees, most of them, and well, all of them, and so it seemed to fit in with our sort of movies, yeah, which are often about refugees and people from somewhere else.
Being isolated.
Being isolated, yeah. Well, this is more isolated than usual, actually, as is that house. So.
Yeah. So, are there any questions? Because we would love to hear some questions. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and would very much like to hear about your work with some of the world's greatest actresses. You worked in A Room with a View, you worked with Maggie Smith and Judi Dench. I would very much like to hear if you could elaborate on like the differences and the similarities in their working style, as well as in Howard Zinn with Emma Thompson and Vanessa Redgrave.
Well, they all have one thing in common. Well, they're all English for one thing, and they all learn their lines, which you can't always count on. But no, well, I mean, each is different. Each, as we know, I mean, they all play different kinds of roles, and I have pretty good relations with my leading ladies. Occasionally, I have not. There have been films where I had a terrible relationship with my leading lady. But for the most part, they want to do a good job. They want to please me. They want to please themselves. They're enjoying themselves. I don't drive them mercilessly. And sometimes it's a lot of fun with them. I mean, some of them are very enjoyable to be with, and most of them, in fact. And I can't really, I mean, we know what they're like. We've seen all their movies. Each one has particular qualities of whatever it is. That's why they're stars.
So please feel free. This is a unique opportunity to ask. We have a question over here.
Is there any official institution that cares for the heritage of the manuscripts of Mrs. Javala?
Now, well, there are two kinds of manuscripts of Mrs. Javala. There are the manuscripts which it's of her fiction, all her novels and short stories. There's that. And those manuscripts have gone to the British Library. But there's another set of manuscripts which are all her film scripts, all her screenplays. And those have gone to the Knight Library at the University of Oregon. So between the two, that's where they are. That was your question, right? Okay.
Yes, can you try from up there with a loud voice?
I wondered if you had ever met Ian Forster before he died, but if you didn't, how you first came to be interested in his work.
I was to meet him in 1961. He was still alive, and I was in London, and a mutual friend had organized a meeting, and I wrote to him asking if I could go up to Cambridge to meet him, and he said, come. And on that day I got ready and I went down. I was staying with friends in London, and I went down, and there was a telegram from him saying, I feel most unwell, some such thing, and could he be excused? Could I be excused? So I never met him. That was I don't know what we would have talked about. The poor man, I mean, he must have been 80 he was about 80 then, 81 or 2. And I was a very young director who didn't have a great deal to say. I probably just would have sat there dumb. But I first read, because of my interest in India, I first read Passage to India, and that's a sort of that was among my general reading on India, and I liked it very much, but I never thought of making it into a film or anything. And then later on, Satyajit Ray wanted to make Passage to India into a film, and Ismail, my partner, was going to produce it for Ray. But Forster would not allow even Ray to make his book into a film. And Ray went to visit Forster in Cambridge and dragged along Patra Panchali and I don't know what all to show him. And he said that Forster liked them and thought they were wonderful, but he still said no. And then in time, and then Ray decided he kind of gave up on the idea. And some years passed, and then Forster died. And then we got a sort of message from King's College at Cambridge. Could we come and see them, Ismail and myself? So we went to have lunch with them. And we thought that probably they were going to, because we had just had a big success in England with Heat and Dust, which was about the British Raj, and in the 1920s. And we thought probably they were going to see whether we were interested, and we went. But by that time I had read A Room with a View, and I decided that it would be wonderful, just in the same way I wanted to go to South America, it would be wonderful to go back to Italy again because I hadn't been there in 20 years. And so we decided that we wanted to make A Room with a View. And we told him that. The mouth sort of dropped open. Why would we want to do that minor little novel? But we did. And then after that, Morris came along. And then finally Howard's End. At one point, Ruth Javala said, well, now you've done all these various things, and why don't you do a real mountain of a book, a great book of Forster's, because Howard's End was, no one had ever optioned it, and so we decided to go for that. And well, we made it, as you know. But I never knew him. And I mean, I got very interested in him, and I read a lot about him, and I read a lot of things he had read, other things besides his novels. But I never knew him. So that's the story.
Speaking of Ray, how did you come about him doing the music for Shakespeare Walla?
Well, I
just repeat the question.
Yeah, how was it that Satyajit Ray did the music of Shakespeare Walla? Well, he'd been involved. Well, when I first went to India, my very first trip to India, I had seen some other films of Ray's which weren't generally known. The Music Room, for instance. No, I'd heard about them. I hadn't seen them yet. And I went to Calcutta, and friends of mine in India said, "Well, just call him up." I was going to Calcutta. They said, "He's in the phone book, just call him up." So when I got to Calcutta, I did just call him up, and I said I was an American making a documentary film, and I'd heard about these other films, The Music Room and The Philosopher's Stone. Was there any way that I could see, particularly The Music Room, because everyone said what a wonderful film it was. And he said, sure, and he told me to come meet him the next day, which I did. He was in the midst of, it was while the censors were looking at Devi, and he was in a sort of coffee house, smoking madly and going up and down, and sort of wondering whether that film would in some kind of way get in trouble with the censors. And he told me to come the next day out to the studio at Taliganj outside Calcutta, and he would show me the film. He would run it for me. So that's how I came to know him. When we made our very first feature, which was The Householder, we had no crew, but Ray was not, this was after that. Ray was not making a film at that time, and we had no cameraman, we didn't have anybody. And so, again, I went to him and I said, is there any way that we could you recommend some people who might help us make The Householder? And what actually happened was his entire crew came. With Subrata Mitra, his cameraman, who then became our cameraman for four features in India, and a number of other people, the assistant director, sound man, so many people came. He helped in that film as well, and also had a lot to do with the music of that film. He recut that film. It was sort of long and unwieldy and awkward, and Ismail and I took it to him in Calcutta, and a huge number of reels and tin boxes on the train, and showed it to him, and he liked it, and said, we said, do you have any suggestions of what we might do with it, because it seemed sort of awkward and unwieldy and so on. And he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. You let me and my editor work on it in our editing room, and I'll recut it. And he said, there's only one condition, that you just leave me alone to do it. And then at the end, if you want to put something back, go ahead, but let me just do my work. So we did that, and it took 3 or 4 days to recut The Householder, and he was there in his editing room with his editor, Dulal Dutta, and he reshaped The Householder, changed the whole form of it, made a lot of cuts in it, and which is fine with me, and with Ismail, and as we were having trouble getting the music together, he didn't compose the music, but he used some musicians who were also composers and players to record a lot of music for The Householder. So when Shakespeare Walla came along, I just simply asked him, will you compose the music for Shakespeare Walla? And he said, well, let me see it. So again, we went to Calcutta with an immense number of reels and tin trunks, and he looked at Shakespeare Walla. He liked it. He said, yes, I will. I'd love to do the music. And he did it. And it took him, I don't know, 2 weeks, something like that. And then we had recording sessions, and that was it. That's the story. Rather long story. Rather long answer, but you did ask.
Yes.
I can share shout?
That's good. Please do.
I wonder if you feel any difference between working with English actors and American actors. I know there are some kind of two different schools. The English actors are sometimes fighting the American actors, and the two form.
No, I didn't really find that, but no, I think, I mean, good, disciplined actors are really the same everywhere. I think if they're really serious, disciplined actors and wanting to do good work, I think wherever you go, they're going to do it. I mean, I've worked in many countries now, and I really couldn't. I mean, there aren't that many differences between American actors and English actors, I think, or any other actors, as I say, if they're disciplined. There is a tendency sometimes in the United States for actors to kind of wing it when it comes to memorizing their lines. That does happen from time to time, but it's never really happened that much to me. I hear stories from other people, and other directors have told me, and editors, that sometimes some actors, sometimes huge stars, just don't prepare at all. And they come, but you can't do that if you have a screenplay based on Henry James, or Ian Forster, or Ishiguro. You can't go to a kind of a, take a stab at it and think it's okay.
Yes, please.
Yes, I'll see if I can shout. Thank you for yet another wonderful movie. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on how to characterize your films and how to describe them, what they're about. I would like to know what you think. If you could sum up your work in some way.
Sum up my work?
You have 5 seconds.
No, I can't really sum up my work like that. I mean, I think about it, and I do know one thing, that all of our films together are kind of combined autobiography of Ruth Ismail and myself. I mean, the films represent our interests, where we were, of course, who we are, or who we were. So it's a kind of a work of the three of us. I mean, the films, let's say. And but I'm afraid I'm not very good at summing up things. I mean, I wish I were, but there are a lot of people who are very good at that, but I'm not so good.
Yes, I have a question. What's the most challenging you've ever had? I don't speak.
Sorry. What's the most challenging you had on set on a movie?
On this
As a
film?
director? No, any movie you made.
Oh, well, there have been lots of challenges in plenty of our films. Really, well, I'll tell you a challenge even on this film. Omar being stung by the bee and falling and all that kind of thing. I mean, that was a very complicated thing to set up, which we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, and we never knew whether it would work or not. And those kinds of episodes in films, I mean, well, seeing someone stung by a bee is not you wouldn't think that would be a very difficult thing to stage, but the whole business of the ladders and the nets and all the rest of it. In this film, that was one of them. But there have been huge things to do sometimes. I mean, the White Countess with the Japanese bombardment and invasion of Shanghai and everyone fleeing in boats was kind of a big deal. We did it in the divorce. We had a hostage-taking sequence in the top of the Eiffel Tower, and which went on and on and on for many days of shooting, because we were only allowed to shoot in the Eiffel Tower from 6 in the morning till 9 in the morning. And then at 9 in the morning, people started coming in, and it was taking us a long time to do all that. And that was a very hard thing to do. I don't know if you know the film Mr. and Mrs. Bridge. You ever seen that film? Well, you remember there's a tornado in it. Well, there's a tornado, and setting up a tornado, but then there's no tornado. it was hard, and it was progressively supposed to get darker and darker and darker and darker during it. So there was only a narrow segment of the day for a number of days when it was just the right degree of darkness outside to do that. And those kinds of things are very hard. But in an overall way, the four most difficult films, and they came in a group to make, were the four films set in India, our very first films. That was really a difficult world, because at that time there was very little import into India of the latest film equipment. You couldn't even get raw stock sometime. And to make films of a professional standard, particularly where sound was concerned, because the sound recording in India they didn't have good equipment then, and everything had to be dubbed afterwards. I mean, it was those four films, that's what I consider our heroic period. And not so much doing films like Room with a View and Howard's End and those. I mean, we had everything you could possibly want, including money. We had no money on the first four films, virtually. Well, we did on the film called The Guru, because that was a 20th Century Fox film. So at last we had money, but we still didn't have the equipment.
I would like to ask you about the music. I mean, which are the criteria you use? First of all, if you are going to use music, and then which music you're going to use. In this film, there's some pieces of music which are very obvious, for instance, Vilja or Vilja. It's obvious to me why you use it, because they live in an isolated world, and the past, that's my interpretation at least. But then you have Jorge Drexler's music, the guitar going again and repeating and so on.
Well, he did the whole score. He scored all the music in the film, except for the things you heard being played on the
gramophone.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, which are the criteria, first of all, when you decide whether to use music or not? And then which music, why? Could you make a film without using any kind of music?
I would hate to. I would hate to.
Why would you hate it?
I mean, I like music. What can I say? And I like music in films, and I particularly like it in my films. But you know, it's to describe how you work with the composer. I think the composer starts having ideas long in advance, even of the shooting. I mean, he starts having, as the director does. I mean, as soon as he reads the script, he starts. I'm pretty sure, thinking about what sort of thing might be appropriate. That's particularly true of music that you hear, so-called source music, like opera or you know, could be popular music, whatever, dance music, and they have very strong ideas about what they want to hear and not hear. Right? You know, they don't want lousy or ordinary music. But then you after the film is edited and they see the film edited and projected in a rough form, they then begin to compose. And I don't know, in working with Richard Robbins for so many years, you know, I would go every so often and have a session with him, and he would try things out for me, perhaps on the piano, or he'd play me something that resembled something that he had in mind, and that kind of thing. And just slowly, it would come together in his mind, and then slowly, usually, I mean, I tended to agree with his choices. Sometimes I didn't, but I tended to like. But there was no one way. With Jorge Drexler, I mean, it was a little difficult working with him because he was in Spain and I was in New York, and I mean, I went to Madrid to be with him, and he'd already thought about it quite a lot, and he had things in mind that he wanted to do. And this was after Richard Robbins could no longer compose. Richard Robbins, our composer, had Parkinson's disease, and the time came when he was unable to compose. And this was the first film that film we just saw was the first film that I'd made that Richard Robbins hadn't done in years and years and years. But I found myself working in very much the same way with Jorge Drexler, even though, I went to Madrid, I stayed there for many days, and he would show me things that he wanted to do, play things for me, tell me this, that, and the other, what he had in mind. And slowly, it came together. And in his case, it was interesting because Jorge Drexler, his family, had an experience very like that of the Goons. They were Jewish. They had fled Berlin, gone to South America, kind of knocked around South America. They could never get visas to go into certain countries, and eventually they did get into Uruguay. So his family history was very like that in the novel. So that was an additional interest for him, which was also one of the reasons that Ruth Zabvala liked this story. So he put something into it which I think came from other places that, yeah.
I think this will be the last question from...
Well, I'm just wondering what's ahead for you now. Do you have any plans?
Yes, I have big plans.
Will you share them?
I'm working on a Shakespeare film, which we're going to make in England. It's the play Richard II, not Third, which has been done many times. Richard II. We have a great star in it, which is Tom Hiddleston. And we're finding slowly other people that are going to be in it. And hopefully this is going to happen at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall.
We will be looking forward to this film. When I spoke to you earlier, James, you said that you weren't working 6 days a week anymore when you shoot, only 5. And only
a long time since I worked 6 days a week. You can't work 6 days a week.
No, and then you said I only work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening, so normal days.
Yes.
We truly appreciate that you still bring this blood and love for the movies. We hope that you will come to visit us again. Thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome, and I very much enjoyed it. And I have to say I enjoyed watching my film again on the big screen. I hadn't seen it in a while, so...